See, my picture's a bit dark, I think, so I'll just put my desk lamp on.
Right. I have got a few apologies. I haven't written them all down because there is quite a few. Louise, Reynolds, Tim, Heath, Jennifer Allen, Chrissy, they all can't make it today. Barbara didn't send me apologies. I was hoping she was going to be on because she did send me a long list of things which look quite interesting to have on an agenda because she'd like an agenda, which is a good idea. Right.
Yep.
So first of all, we'll get back to the last meeting. I was having a lot of problems with Blue Jeans. We have got Barbara.
There's Barbara.
Right, Barbara, we have started the meeting and we are recording it. I've read out the apologies. So we'll get down to the last meeting, and we decided, I'd been having a look at pre-conference call, which, as it says, is a free conference. Just a minute. Oh, I've now got, honestly, Windows. There's been 3 big updates, and I've just got a big notice come up on my screen. Important updates are pending. So remind me later. Oh, Jesus. Since they've been doing these updates, I've lost my blog. My blog is completely, that won't load anymore. And I've got in touch with the hosts to see what can be done because I can't get into my blog. Anyway, so we were talking about free conference. So we had a trial video meeting last Friday, wasn't it, Barbara?
It was, yes. Yeah.
That was Keith, Barbara, and Kevin, and we had a meeting. It went okay, but not successful as we thought it could be. The sound quality was not that good. Keith had a job to get on. But in the end, we turned back to Blue Jeans and we got back on Blue Jeans. Now, the problem I'm having with Blue Jeans is I was talking to the chap about record. So if I'm not at a meeting, somebody could turn the record on. There is an auto record, but it doesn't, I can't set it because we want enhanced recording. So I got in touch with Blue Jeans, blah, 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 and they took the bull by the horns and put us on my team. I was on me before, which was £9.99, and he put us on my team, which jumped up to £13 something, which wasn't too bad, but it annoyed me because he lost my video from the last meeting. So I really wrote him a stinking letter or an email, and he said, we don't want to lose customers. I'll put you on my team for the same price. Because I asked him for the money back. And he said, because we'd paid a year. So we are now on my team for $9.99 a month. And we have got Dolby Voice, which the sound quality is a lot better. So we have gained in that direction, but that I still can't get anyone else to turn the record on. So I gave him an email during the week, and because we're on my team and I should be able to turn, other people to turn the record on, and he said, no, you've got to go up to another one. So all they're doing is trying to put you up. I think these people there, they're not really engineers as such. They work on commission. So they're trying to put you up all the time to a different level. Anyway, I tried. I said to you at the meeting, Barbara, that said 89p per month for an extra host. Yeah?
Yeah.
But when I try to do it, the person who you're putting on at 89p has got to have the Me account.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's going to cost an extra $9.99 a month plus 89p, which
Yeah.
really brings us up over 300. That's ridiculous. So I sent Keith an email explaining that he could use my account. I think I did this with you, didn't I, Ray?
You not.
A
I'm not sure
little
with
while
Blue
ago.
Jeans, was it?
Oh, yeah, I don't know if it was.
We will-
Anyway,
Yeah.
so I sent Keith an email saying that he could use my account to get in. He can set meetings via my account and go log in under my account in the web part, not the app, the web side, and then he could set record. The only trouble in being as me, but that isn't a big thing, is it?
No.
At least
Unless they can detect by what computer you're using, you know. If
Well, I'm using two. I've got both
Yeah.
of mine on at the moment,
And they haven't queried.
They haven't queried it.
No.
So
Okay.
so anyway, so see,
Ronnie,
I've got
are your two computers the same IP address? Because they might be checking.
Yeah,
see,
that's
I've got
what
my
I
other
meant.
one on. Yeah, I've got my other one on. Uh, well, they come from the main IP host, but of course here they're different IP.
Mm.
So I don't think that's going to be a big deal. No, well, yeah. When I go up North Norfolk, that's a different IP, isn't it?
different.
And I can get on there okay, no trouble. So I think we'd be okay doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Keith could then plan a meeting, and he could start off record. Okay. Once he started off record, he could come out of my account and go into his own account because record is set.
Yeah.
So he could do that, and then he'd be logged as Keith on. But I don't think he wants to do that. He can just stay on as me. So that's all what's happening with Blue Jeans. Okay.
Okay.
So I think we're okay with this as it is because the free conference call wasn't a complete success, was it, Barbara?
No, and the quality of the sound and the vision on the Blue Jeans is far superior to that one too. But it was well worth a trial.
That was worth a try, but we're not going to pay over 300 quid. That's ridiculous a year. That's stupid. So we'll keep it as it is, and at the moment we're paying 119 a year for the year, which isn't too bad. Right, so that's all about Blue Jeans. So that's fair enough. We also discussed agendas, which Barbara brought up, and she sent me a long list, which was really good. I put it on. I sent it out to all the members, and we got some good feedback on it. So
Good.
the list looks good. So really, out of that list, Barbara, we want to pick things for different meetings, don't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Some of these
Hopefully we'll get more participants then as well, if if we can encourage them and there's something that means something to somebody may attract them on,
Yeah.
Another couple of things which I didn't think of which may attract people, and especially might get us to get Meg Parks or Lizzie Oliver involved, is the forthcoming Art of Captivity exhibition.
Yeah, she could come on and talk about that.
Yeah, she might be inspired to do that because obviously she wants to attract attention.
Yeah.
And another thing that I don't think I mentioned, sorry, I have a big list of things, is the entertainments that Sears Eldridge did. I'm sure you're all aware of Sears Eldridge, the American professor who researched the camp entertainments. He's a super guy. I was lucky enough to get to know him quite well at the one conference in Liverpool, and I'm sure that he might come on and talk to us at some point, depending on the time differential. And I'd quite happily contact Sears and see whether he would like
Yeah,
to participate.
I can leave that
It's
one
quite
to
an
you then.
interesting subject, all the camp entertainments, because I'm always amazed at what they were able to
Yeah.
produce. Yeah.
I'll get in touch with Meg because I have been trying to get her to come on the Facebook for a little while now.
Yeah.
She's got something about the Facebook. She thinks she's got all the bad press about her, and she doesn't.
Oh,
But I have been trying to push her in that direction because she was
yeah.
on the FIPO community, which, to be honest, has completely fell flat now. We
Really?
hardly get anything coming through it at all.
Hmm.
I had, during the week, I had one person get in touch and wanted to join. And I thought, well, yeah, I'll join you, but there's not much happening.
Hmm.
But on the Facebook side, we've lost a couple more out of the members bit, the charity bit, but we have gained a couple, so we're still about 40, which isn't too bad. On the Facebook pages, I should think most of you have seen, we did reach 500.
Yeah.
So that's gone really well, and we are getting some really good stuff coming on Facebook.
Yeah.
So the Facebook pages have gone really well. We're up to, that was last week, we're up to 516 now.
Fabulous.
So it is going really well, and we're getting Janice Skilton's birthday today. So
Right.
if you send her
I will send her a message. Yeah.
message,
Find out how she is. Yeah.
it's her birthday today. She hasn't been very well, but she has been helping me a lot with the Facebook, and I do appreciate what she's been doing. She's not a member of the charity, but she said she wants to join, so hopefully we can get her in on the video, the video meetings as well. But she has been very ill. You know,
Yeah.
she's got lung problems, so she's breathing trouble. Which because I had pleurisy, I do know what she's going through.
Yeah. She actually raised her lung problems as a possible hereditary factor from her FIPO father, which was interesting. And she was interested to know, whether there could be any links genetically or
Well, that's funny. But
Yeah.
when I was in hospital, I was in hospital for a good 2 weeks. My thoughts went back to my dad, because my dad had a lung operation when he came home. And I was born when he came home, and he had a part of his lung removed. That wasn't TB, it was a tropical disease he got in the Far East. But they wouldn't, if he'd have got TB, they'd have given him a pension. But because they hadn't heard of the disease, they wouldn't give him a pension.
Yeah, it wasn't listed. Yes.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well,
so
we learn.
that
we
is
learn.
funny what you're saying, because when I was in hospital, I was thinking, if I was in the camps, I'd be dead now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they didn't have the facilities I got in hospital. That's really strange, really strange. But as you said, it could be something linked somewhere along the chain.
Yeah.
It's
something we've tried to get Meg Parks interested in as well.
Yeah, Meg is really good on the tropical diseases, so if we could get her involved, that would be really, really good.
Yeah, either Meg or Lizzie Oliver, whose father was a FIPO.
I don't know
well.
Lizzie, but I do know
She works.
Meg.
She's in Meg's team.
Oh,
She's not very well herself at the moment.
No, I heard she was unwell. Yes. Yeah.
well, I will chase Meg again every now and again. And she said last time I talked to her, well, I will come on, but she hasn't come on. That was about 2 months ago. So I'll give her another email and see what she says. But your list, it's very good. I've just had Meg Parks to the bottom. Some of this we have talked about. The story of the Ramusha, we've talked about them. Internees, we haven't really, have we?
No.
Ramusha would be quite a good one to talk about.
The Ramusha, when I put on the on Facebook, what I'd found on the Indo-China one, the amount of response was amazing to me.
Yeah, I
From
think,
people.
yeah, I think a lot of people haven't heard. Just a minute. I didn't order this book. Someone sent it to me. Oh, a lot of years ago. Can you see it?
Yes. Mm.
And it's all about Ramusha.
Oh, is it
It's
Traces of War?
it's yeah, Traces of War. It's a very good book. It's mainly Dutch. It's mainly the Dutch in Java, Indonesia.
Yeah.
It's by Jan Banning, Banning. But it's quite a good book, but it's taken from interviews with certain Ramusha. I mean, this is how they look now.
Mm.
So you can see that is, but it's a good book. It's
Okay.
That's the first book I read, and I understood what they went through.
Yeah.
That's quite good.
Mm.
I don't know when it was published. I've had it quite a while, so don't know how I got it. Someone sent it to me. No, I haven't. That hasn't got a. Hasn't got a published date. No, it hasn't got a published date on it. Anyway, so that's I enjoyed that book. You know, well, I didn't enjoy it because that's a bit.
No. We know what you mean. We don't enjoy
Yeah.
these books.
No.
They
Have you
lots of
found
emotions.
some of the new books I can't get into? I just can't. I get some of the new books and I start on them, and you've heard all the stories before, and from the peoples themselves. And when you start getting into these books, all they are hand-me-down stories.
Yeah, second-hand
don't-
history.
And you don't get the feeling. You know, when the peoples wrote a book, you could feel them there. They explained it, and you could feel the emotion. But on some of the new books, they're just reading out a story they've heard, and it's not the same. It's definitely not
agree.
the same.
Mm.
Do you feel the same?
Absolutely. And as I said at the meeting the other week, I find that I get so far through books and I get so emotionally involved and upset by them. I've got so many books I just can't read. I have to wait, and maybe a year or two later I go back and finish them because they take quite an emotional toll on you, because you sort of imagine what it was like because you've had a father who was there and you've got that connection to them.
There's some books I got a couple 6 months ago, 9 months ago, and I read both books completely through, both of them, and there was 2 snippets in one book that really jumped out and hit me, and really a lump come in my throat. I couldn't carry on. That really hit me, and then the next book that had one little bit in it that stood out and hit me, and your whole book to get just that one little bit, you know, it's I think I don't know if I'm being a bit, but you know, because I mean, can you see my books?
Yes, I can.
And they're all people books. Some of them I really did. I mean, you can see the Railway of Death. I really did John Coast. That's, you know, I keep pushing it. That's one of my favourites. But we might be having another favourite, mightn't we, Martin?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm sitting listening to all these comments about modern books and recent books. I'm thinking,
Yeah.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
but yeah, look, I'm fully aware of what your comments are, because I purposely set out not to write a book about a story that's been written and written and written so many times before. So I've dedicated my book to the fifth Beds and Hearts, and done some pretty heavy duty, in depth research, and sort of really followed a bunch of guys from the local villages from where I came from, and got a lot of personal stuff and some good anecdotal stuff from their families and so forth. But not only that, I think that where I've probably gone that sort of one step further is that I've actually been out and smelt the roses. So all of these camps, all of these guys, I've been to every Group 2 camp on that railway, and been in and had a look, and basically got amongst it. Battle sites in Singapore, I've crawled all over Hill 105 where the Beds and Hearts were. So I know the geography, I know the layout, I know it intimately. So that's really helped my story because I've got a good understanding and insight into not only from diaries and from handwritten accounts, but from actually going there and actually experiencing what the terrain was, even listening to the bird life, or what the conditions are like and so forth. So you get a real good understanding of what they're experiencing. So look, I've probably included fair bit of some of the terrain and camp. Like that's helped me to do mapping and to get some photographs today of what's there today. And of course, I mean, the TBRC have been a great help as well. They've helped me along with a lot of the aerial photos and stuff, so can really, which has enabled us to get into some of these camps as well, because since I've been involved at Tarkanoon, I mean, Tarkanoon is the area that I've really taken on, and of course, the terrific work that Rod's done has been to sort of map and discover all the locations of all the camps, but
it's 10:30.
Doesn't necessarily mean that they're exactly where he's plotted them. So I've actually been in and actually been able to find, two definite camp locations, which is the 203 camp, which is described by John Coast. So I've actually been in there several times now, and actually got to know the family who live on that camp quite well, and found various bits and pieces. But also, when I was up in Thailand just last week, Rod came up with me to survey this the 204 camp, which is the Japanese supply camp, the transport camp. So when you see all those photographs of Sagano, that Sagano took at Tarkanoon, where you see the atap huts and the hills in the background, and the river seam with all the boats around the bay, that's actually at the supply camp. That's not base camp or the 203 camp. That's the Japanese supply line camp. So we've got in there farmers, local farmers are in there, so we've got to know them a bit as well, and so we've got in there, and lo and behold, yeah, we've made some fantastic discoveries in there. We found the exact site of a tent, and the reason we know we found the exact site of a tent is because we found these, which are tent pegs. Yeah.
Wow.
And we found first of all, we found one, and Rod said straight away, he goes, oh, I know what that is. He said that's because when we first hit it with a metal detector and started digging it up, and we just see the round top, and Rod said immediately, he goes, well, I know what that is. He said that's a tent peg. He said I found them like this, exactly the same as this at Hintock. So he said well, look, you go that way, and from here about 4 meters, he said I bet you find another one. So lo and behold, bang, we hit another one. And then he says, right, now you need to go to your right, and we'll find the other two, So we found the other one. So we actually found three, and where the fourth would have been is where the farmers have actually put some reticulation piping in. So they've obviously, at some point, they've dug that up previously. But having the 3 points, obviously that puts the exact location of a tent, which is pretty good in terms of surveying and discovering the campsite. So Yeah, it was really interesting. We found plenty of other bits and pieces like boot heels, steel heels.
Oh,
That these ones are British, and this shape are Japanese. But
oh,
obviously, when the monsoon rains have come and it's turned to a bog and they've been stuck in the mud, they suck the heels off, and of course they've
yeah.
been laying in the ground all that time. Yeah. So yeah, been some really interesting finds. Found really good little cigarette lighter,
Ah,
little Zippo type cigarette lighter. Yeah. So we found like normal bits and pieces like buckles and lids off ointment tubes and things like that. So it was good because we really sort of was able to confirm exactly with looking at the photographs, looking at the river, the layout of the river and the embankment. We were really able to place exactly where the camp was laid out. Where the huts were, where the tented area was, and yeah, that was really interesting. So that's going to be my next project when I finish the book, which the book should be finished in about 3 weeks.
oh,
It's
getting
actually
close.
it's actually having its final sanity check. It's called apparently. Kerry Cracknell, who edited John Cooper's books, doing mine as well. So she's got it this weekend, and so she's said just wants to do her final check on it. Now it's all set out in PDF, ready for print, and so once that comes back, yeah, it's all systems go for that.
Yeah, but
And then
that Martin is you've got the feel of it, haven't you? I mean, I know you.
yes, yeah,
You've got the feel of it. Where some of the books we've been talking about, they haven't been there. They haven't done what you've done. All they've done is listen to different stories. I mean, I had one
yep,
chap get in touch with me, and he said, "Can I come and see you?" I'm not going to mention a name, and I don't rarely meet the people. I tend to stay away from meetings and everything. But in this case, I said, fair enough. He was in the area, so I said, right. So he came round, and all he was doing is milking me for stories. I know what he was doing. He was just milking me for stories, and he's writing a book, and he keeps putting it on Facebook. He's writing this book, blah blah blah, and he annoys me so much because all he's doing is writing other people's stories down. And he got in touch with me and said, um, I'm going to add all these to my book. I take it it's okay with you. So I said, well, which ones you add? And he said, well, all the ones we were talking about. So he's all he's doing is adding
Hearsay,
a
isn't it,
a
from
lot
his
about my
part?
father as well, which annoys me. But that gets to another point. We all know Michael Hirst. Michael Hirst used to be in the Feeple community, and he got in touch with me and said, because he's been writing a book, hasn't he, Michael Hirst? He's been
yes,
writing,
yeah,
and he got in touch and he said, I'm adding this to the book. Just thought I'd let you know. And that was something I'd written on Feeple community years ago. So I got back to him and said, well, you should have asked permission first. He said, I can't get in touch with people and ask permission. I'll put in what I want. I thought, honestly, that's not a nice attitude.
No. Can I just say, what you've just shown us, Martin, that is one of the amazing advantages of having this video conferencing.
Yeah.
No matter what pictures you put of what you've just shown us in the book, I won't now be able to sort of feel almost what you're showing me. You've brought that to life for me by showing that here, and I much appreciate that. And I think that, showing us the heel things,
the heel was,
yes,
to be able to see those, we've shared almost that with you, and that's fabulous. Thank you so much for showing us those. And your book will be different because you've been there, you've done that. Like John Cooper, you know, his archaeology and everything brings those things to life. So don't worry, your book will be great. And I know what Ray's doing with his research too. These are hands-on experiences.
Yeah, I think with the Ubon story, it's not just about a POW camp. It was the camp where 3,000 men were liberated from, and that itself is a story, because the connection goes back to things like Seri Tai, which you don't find a lot of information about the Seri Tai, the Thai freedom movement, resistant movement. And in fact, in Thailand, they don't know very much about Seri Tai. And the other thing that adding to what Martin was saying, sort of putting your arms around the subject and not just talking about the specific event. The other thing that I find interesting, that there's not an awful lot out there, is how Thailand became embroiled with the Japanese. You know, what happened. Well, we know what happened, but when you dig into the politics behind it, it's very, very interesting. And the attitude of the Thai people towards the Japanese and towards the prisoners is quite different. You know, they hated the Japanese overall. There were some sympathisers, but they hated the Japanese. And my last visit to Ubon a few weeks ago, that was the theme that started to come out. Because can I tell you this story? When I go to Ubon, it's a bit like this group. They sort of greet me, and it's like, oh, it's Ray's back in town. You know, we must meet and have a meal and all this. And so I kept it very low key this time. And I was there about 10 days before I put my head above the surface and said, I'm back. So we had this meeting at one of the hotels in Ubon, and we're having a nice meal, and it was going its usual thing. You know, there was nothing had happened for the last year and a half, and you know, but we want to do this, we want to do that. And one of the guys there just disappeared back to the buffet to get some more food, and he came back with these 3 people. And he's all animated. He said, Ray, you must meet these people. So, you know, politely stood up and did all of this. And it turned out that this was the retired police commissioner from Bangkok. And his job, one of his jobs during his career, was bodyguard to Thaksin, apparently. Thaksin is the deposed prime minister of a few years back. And he was very keen to encourage the group to promote Ubon, because he's retired. He's personally doing this We Love Ubon campaign. He wants to get Ubon back on the map. And with him, one of the other 2 people was the mayor of Ubon, who I had met before. And she's on the bandwagon as well, because they're all, you know, motivated by each other. And then the upshot was that we had a meeting in the mayor's office a few days later, and the objective of the group now is to show how the people of Ubon reacted to the Second World War, and part of that story is the prisoners, of course. So that's the tack it's taking, and thinking of it like that there was a lot of help from the people, particularly after the liberation. You know, they came with parties and events like horse racing. They built a cinema in the camp, and lots of things like that. So what I'm trying to say is that I agree with you that the books you read now, it's sort of regurgitating what we already know. Very narrow view of the life of a FIPO. But there's a whole load of stuff on the outside that's never been touched before. And that's where we need to go, I think, to try and get the overall picture before it does actually go.
I think
the archaeology is very important. I think the archaeology leads us on to an understanding of where they were, what they were using, and throws real light onto it. So, you know, I hope that you know, John Cooper, what he started will continue, and yourself, Martin.
Yeah, I think that's what.
Yeah, well, John was a great inspiration to me, for sure, because I met up with John probably first time about 3 or 4 years ago, and we had a bit of a walk over Hill 105 together, and we actually found some bits and pieces on the surface, when we walked across it, which made his eyes light up and sparkle,
His
So,
enthusiasm is fantastic.
oh, absolutely, yeah. So we bounced a whole heap of stuff off each other, and then that was from that point we sort of was really interested that well, a survey on that hill would be great. But the trouble is, of course, it's national park, and being national parks, you're going to have to get formal permissions to do it, and there's a lot of red tape in Singapore to jump through all those hoops and bits and pieces. So anyway, I mean, we've done a bit of poking around up there anyway, and and found all just these various bits and pieces, and John actually encouraged me to write a report on the hill, which he's put my report on his website, which is terrific. And someone approached me just recently, and they found me because of the report, and said, "Oh, I've read your report." And he says, "My father was on the hill and got killed on that hill," which was great for that to come that way. Anyway, what I'm leading to say is that look, getting to know John, and he gave me a copy of one of his templates for his surveys, which I emulated and wrote and put together the Hill 105 report, which now has sort of like put me in a position where I've learned a great deal on how to set it out and how to research it and how to document it and so forth. So that's what I'm planning now to do with Tarkanoon. Is there's 8 camps in Tarkanoon, and we've found 7 so far. There's still another one to find yet. And we haven't actually definitely found base camp yet. We're sort of tossing up between a few locations where it would be. But obviously, getting on that site with a metal detector and finding something actually is the evidence, and that's what pinpoints it. So that's where I'm going to be focusing on. The next few years is trying to find the base camp. Where all the burials were. The 203 camp, the lower camp, there was only 34 burials on that particular camp. There's nothing, no burials on the transport camp, and then there was about 170 odd on the base camp. So so John was definitely an inspiration to me to get more involved in that side. I mean, I'm no archaeologist or anything, but I'm prepared to get in amongst it and have a good stab at it and rummage around and see what you can come up with. But
I think we need
interesting
to before
enough
it disappears anyway. The archaeology will disappear, won't it?
The camps obviously in some areas. I mean, Rod's been pointing out for a number of years that there's probably only 30% left of the original railway in Thailand, and that's outside of the existing line. So after Nam Tok up to the 3 pagodas, there's only probably got 30% left, and the rest of it's gone, just bulldozed. And that the particular spot where we stopped just the other week and had our laptop stolen was at Lintin, and we stopped because the farmer had been bulldozing close to the edge of the road where the railway embankment ran, and he's actually cut a fair bit of it away. So we went in there, the usual thing, have a look around for bits and pieces, spikes and bolts and stuff. And of course, then that was after that we came back to the car to find that the car had been ransacked and laptops and stuff were stolen.
Do you take a metal detector with you or anything like that, or do you?
Yeah, I've got a telescopic Wi-Fi one. It's a French one, which is very easy to travel with, which has been great.
Do you have any trouble, Martin? Do you have any trouble getting that through customs, or do they?
No. Because it's in my main bag, so it goes underneath, and we about 8 police turned up to the scene when we had the robbery of the car, and my metal detector was in the back of the ute anyway, so they all standing there looking at it. No one asked a question. None of the police were interested. So, I think. What we do, of course, is we don't go out in public doing anything like that. Of course, it's with permission on people's private land and things like that. Because the camps are all on farmers' lands generally, especially up around Tarkanoon.
Yeah, what we were talking about with books, I started a book a few years ago, but I started writing my dad's story, and then I changed it because after I had pleurisy, I got a different look on it. So the book started now. I haven't really done much on it lately, but it starts with me in hospital with pleurisy and looking back. And I thought, well, I won't do Dad's story. I'll do my story because my story is tied up with Dad's story. So I started doing my story with how Dad's POW life affected me. And so I went along those lines. So that that ended up not Dad's story. That started on my story. And no, I, I mean, we all get enthusiastic about different things. I know I can't get out to Thailand because I can't fly now. But to me, Dad's guilt complex in leaving many of his mates there is the way I go. So mine is all on remembrance, the roll of honour. So that's where I've gone now. That's the remembrance side that I do, where you're more involved in getting to the, like John does, to the battlefield.
Playing in the
Having
dirt.
a
Yeah,
look.
go and,
Yeah.
yes,
It's
smell the
a
roses.
Yeah, it's a different way of looking at it, isn't it?
But yeah, there's still,
we're all motivated by something.
yeah. I mean, but obviously, the story and the picture builds from research and from a lot of the files and documents and reading and understanding what you're reading, because there's little snippets of information everywhere. And the way that we found the Japanese transport camp, because I knew it was there for a long time, but I needed to prove it was there. I'll just for myself go and identify it. And it's written it's mentioned in Hardy's book, because when Hardy first reached Tarkanoon, that's the 203 camp, the same camp that John Coast was at, and he left there the following day, and on the way, he says the next day we passed Japanese transport and hospital camp. He actually says that, just above, and then in Captain De Quincey's diary of 4th Suffolk, he actually writes a summary on the transport camp, the 204 camp, because he actually describes that when they arrived at Tarkanoon, there wasn't enough tents available for number 8 battalion. Number 1 battalion was already there and taken all the tents, so 104th Suffolks had to go up and be billeted at the transport camp, which was always interests me, because I was always thinking, well, if we're going to find some POW stuff at the transport camp, it's likely to be 4th Suffolk, so the biggest prize was to try and find a badge, to try and find some evidence of those guys who went up there. So just piecing those little bits and pieces together from reading accounts and reading books, you start to go, hang on, there's a camp there, and then you start working on, well, where is it? And then you start studying Google Maps, and you start studying, bits and pieces. Then you get a gut feeling where it is, and then of course you got to go there and have a look and find out. Yeah. And Jan and I were up there in January, and we actually went in there in January, and we found it, because the reason we knew we found it is because went there with a metal detector, and we found railway spike in there, So why would a railway spike be 200 or 300 metres away from the railway line? So it proved that there was something in there. So when I spoke to Rod about it, he says, "Oh, can you come up again in May?" He says, before the end of the dry season, so we can go up and have a look, So that's hence why I went back last week, and went in there, and bang, all these great discoveries. Yeah, so it's great now. We can actually document it now that we've actually formally located it and identified it.
But I found because Dad let me read his diary in the 1960s, so I mean, then a lot of the Feebles used to see Dad, so I used to listen to the stories. So that's really how I got started on being interested in it. But things changed, don't they? Because when we had the shop, I used to have people's call in the shop, and we used to sit there and talk for hours. But that was their stories, weren't it? But now those stories are no longer there, so we're relying on what you say, going and looking at the sites and everything. But it's funny how things have changed, isn't it? You know, when I was younger, it's listen to the Feebles. Now it's reading books.
Yes, and researching.
And it's okay. I don't mind it because I get on the Q files and do my research that way. So when somebody asks what happened to the dad or can you add him to the Roll of Honor, I just use Q files now. I don't hardly use the books. I use Q files, and what I can remember what the Feebles told me, you know, that was good listening to them. I mean, some of them, the right characters. I mean, I had one chap who he lived near our shop and used to come in quite near enough every day and talk. And we called him Jock, was Jock Simon. And he wrote Helen 5. And he used to come in, and the stories he used to tell me were absolutely brilliant. They were absolutely brilliant. But he was sometimes you didn't know whether to believe him or not because he was a character. You know, he's full of it. He's the right character. But that's what I miss. I miss those things.
Can I just chip in there, Ronnie? Because I'm reading Arthur Lane's book at the moment, the One God, Too Many Devils.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anybody else has read it, Barbara or Martin, but
long time ago.
I was a bit. I was a bit sort of taken aback, to be honest, because some of the things he says in there are, well, at the moment we're going through this problem with the Northern Ireland soldiers, aren't we? Being tried for offences that they may or may not have committed 40 years ago. Some of the things that Arthur Lane says in there, you know, I mean, it's outrageous.
Well, but you've got to take Arthur, because he ran Nessa, he ran Nessa, and he asked me to do them a website after I'd done the Cathedral one, which I did do. And Arthur, if you have a look at the Feeble community, you'll find Arthur Lane on there, and I've got a lot of his stuff on there, a lot of it, including that book in full. He sent me the whole thing, so that is on there in full. I've got quite a few of Arthur's books, but Arthur was always controversial. He always like, the tall man, what was his name? Cyril, come on, help me. My names are getting terrible now. But anyway, he was killed in a plane crash during the trial.
Cyril Wilde.
Yeah, that's right, Cyril Wilde. He swears blind he was killed, and he won't budge from it. He was killed, blah, blah, blah. He gets something. Arthur was a funny chap. But if you saw the journey to Changi prison, which I put on, Arthur Lane was in that, and someone got in touch with me and said, can you put forward some names? And I put forward Arthur Lane because I was doing the Nessa one at the time, and Reg Rayner because he's a good friend, and Reg Rayner's wife Wynne, who used to send me loads of poems. So I put their names forward, and that if you have a look at that they're in that, and I lent Reg a camera to take with him to Singapore to take pictures, and somewhere along the line the tape went missing, and I didn't have a copy, and so that lady sent me the disc, and that was brilliant to watch. Reg in particular, because Reg was a good friend, but Arthur was. He called himself the musician of the dead. because he used to play the bugle at the funerals.
Mm.
It was interesting, but he was a bit controversial. He did go sometimes to extreme in the other direction.
Do you think he did it to sort of provoke things a bit, especially towards the establishment?
I'm not talking about the dead really, but some of the stuff I enjoyed. Some of the stuff he sent me I really did enjoy, but other stuff, no. He went too far.
Yeah, I think he's gone too far in this book, to be honest.
Yeah. Some of the stuff was very interesting. I mean, if you have a look at the Feeple community, just have a look for Arthur Lane and you'll see all the stuff on there. There's loads of stuff on there. And he sent me something once and I didn't agree with it. He wanted me to put it on and I didn't agree with it. He said, well, you can take the rest off. I said, no, I'm not. Send it to me and it's staying. And he got real nasty about it. You take the rest off if you're not going to print that. I said, no, you send it to me, it's staying on. He's a funny chap. He was really a peculiar chap. But again, he did a lot for the Feeple, of course. So you can't, he did bring a lot of it to light. And one of his, I can't remember the chap's name now. He died about the year 2000. And he started off a Roll of Honour. And he died, and I said to Arthur Lane, I'll take it on. So I took it on and put it on Nessa, but that was all services. That wasn't just the Far East, that was everything, First World War, everything. And I started it off, and he didn't have many on it, but I started off and, of course, got now very large. But that was the start of the Roll of Honour, really, from the chap from Nessa. So that's how I really... And my dad was alive at the time, and I showed Dad it, and he said that was a good idea because, I said Dad had this guilt complex about getting home. So I thought that would help him. So that's how I really got to grips with it. And I think that did help him. I think that helped him a bit, but to go through all that, Did any of you watch Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah, I watched it yesterday.
All right, I've got it in the drawer. Yeah, I love that.
I've seen it before,
Yeah, well,
How realistic do you feel it is?
Ray was talking about the bridge on the River Kwai. And my dad hated it. He really hated that film. He really did hate it. But I watched David Bowie's film when it came out. I actually went to watch it on the cinema. And that stuck. And you don't hear much of it. And yet that's a good film. That shows the brutality of the guards and everything. And the Koreans.
I think the treatment side of it's very accurate,
Yeah.
The way they behaved and the way they treated them.
And we all tend to back off certain subjects, don't we? And there was homosexuality in the camps. There was, and Dad told me there was. But of course, on the railway, because they were so undernourished, they didn't have that urge. But in certain camps, there was men who were homosexual, and they did put themselves forward. We always tend to get away from that, but
this comes back to the entertainments, because some of the men dressed as women and were quite convincing. And I did ask Sears Eldridge, well, how did that go down where you've got, a very feminine-looking man, with these men? And I raised it with Meg Parks as well. It was a question I put forward for the conference. But what they said to me was, well, you have to think that when men were so worn out, starved and suffering, that they lost that urge. But to see these men dressed up, perhaps doing these pantomimes, as some of them were, must have been a bit strange for them, and it's a bit of a weird thing. It takes me on, you saying about that film. There was a comment, was it on the FIPO community this week, about that the Dam Busters film had been on,
Yeah, that was me
And
that put that on.
That
Yeah,
was
was it
Ray.
Ray?
yeah.
Right. So maybe, as opposed to showing that film, which caused so much bad feeling for the FIPOs, maybe Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, Mr.
Well,
Robinson,
uh,
would
I,
Yeah,
would
that's
be a
right.
better film to show.
I
Yeah,
thought about the context of um, Thursday night showing of the Dam Busters, and it was
Yeah,
two things really. It was to celebrate or commemorate, the better word, the 75th anniversary of the raid,
yeah,
but also it's a damn good film.
yeah.
It
that
was
is a well-made film.
well made, and it's it's up there amongst the best British films ever made about war. So I mean, they
Mm,
were celebrating the film as well, and I thought when I came out of it that I really really enjoyed the whole night because it was
mm,
um, shown full screen in the cinema, and the first hour was Dan Snow in the Royal Albert Hall, which was absolutely packed to the rafters, and interviews with people. You know, they had the daughter of Barnes Wallis. They had the granddaughter of the director of the film, and they brought it together. And I thought, yeah, it's a celebration of a lot of things. Now,
mm,
maybe the Bridge of the River Kwai, because it was in its context as a movie, it's good. Its actual
Yeah,
fact related is poor, beyond poor. It's really bad. But to bring it together, and I just thought, what a great way to show the FIPOs. If somebody like Dan Snow can put on a show like that,
mm,
and with a reasonable film, it would be good to get the FIPO story out there because it
yeah.
isn't out there, is it?
The trouble is with the film. I mean, the fact is poor. It was a well-made film,
Mm.
but the fact behind it was very poor. I mean, some of the stuff about the party, going to blow up the bridge and that. I mean, that's a load of rubbish.
Help them to build the bridge with the design.
Yeah,
mm,
but no,
Is it?
but I think something like Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. Um, although, I mean, that's based in Indonesia, Java, isn't it? I think that's a well-made film. I think because you can feel the emotion. This is what I'm saying about books, Martin. It's not just the horror you want to read, it's the little things. Like my dad, the grass under Dad's bed was his. Now that is what I want to hear. That grass under his bed was his and he mixed it with his rice. That type of thing is it.
Well,
You know what I mean?
I got some wonderful, wonderful little anecdotes from Mr. Private William Brown, who's still with us. He lives in Norwich, and I think he's 101 in December, and he's the only Beds and Hearts I know of who's still alive. There possibly is others, but he's the only one that I'm aware of who's alive. And we went to visit him last year, and he was incredible. His recollection on the road, he was the same group as my grandfather, Group 2, and on the same train up to Thailand, same working party, but he had no recollection of many of the guys on the row, and he actually didn't really recall a great deal about the railway. But Battle of Singapore, he was just absolutely incredible. He was just so sharp, and without me prompting him, he started coming up with various names. And while I was sitting talking to him, I had my laptop with me, so I've got my own database. And so when he'd bring a name up, I'd look him up and sort of, see what happened to him. And he'd start talking about, Billings. I remember Billings, and this and this and this happened. And you start checking the record, and yeah, that's exactly what happened to him. And then he started talking about guys who, because he was an MT driver. And he was talking about how they were taking vehicles back to Singapore and disarming them and so forth, and then coming back up to the reserve line. And he said on one particular trip, he said this mortar went under this truck in front of me and blew this fella Rulton's legs off. Blew a leg off and whatever. And of course, then I check his record. Yeah, he's an amputee. So everything just fitted. It was amazing.
Yeah,
He's just,
yeah,
but he was just so precise. Names and this guy did this and this guy that did that. But then when it came to, like I said, when it came to Thailand, he was very, very vague, and he said, I just don't really remember much about the railway. He said.
yeah. I think, yeah, talking to my dad, he could remember things that happened in training. He could help loads of little things that happened in training, but the railway, very, very little. I think Dad tended to shut himself off, so he went blank. He used to talk to his father, who died in 1938. He used to talk to him, and that got. He swears blind. That's what got him through. He wiped everything else off. He didn't want to know about anything else. And
as you know, my father was a Normandy veteran, so obviously a different type of war that he had. But I remember him talking a lot about him being a young boy, about 14 years old when the war broke out, and joining the Home Guard, and it was an adventure, and he remembers a lot about that. He joined the army as soon as he could when he was 18, and went through a year and a half of training, which he also enjoyed, and he remembers things about that. But on the D-Day landings, he was there D-Day +4. His whole attitude changed because he was in a place he didn't want to be anymore, and he was just told to run over there, so he ran over there. He didn't know where he was running to, why he was running there, or what to do when he got there. He just did it because he was scared to death, And I think that's a similar thing with the Feepols. They blank it out because
but little things my dad used to say. My dad was, because we live near Acle, and there is a pub at Acle, and Dad, the Norfolks, of course, were in defences in Norfolk, and he did actually stay at the pub in Acle doing training. And my mum was Galston, which is about 12 mile away, and he used to walk down the Acle Straight. Now, to him, he could tell me everything about walking down the Acle Straight. He could tell me everything. The car, there weren't very many cars then, so if a car come past, he had his uniform on, some to lift. He said they'd always give you a lift because you had your uniform. But when he went to sign up with 5 of his mates. As you said, to them, that was an adventure. They didn't think about being killed. That was an adventure. We'll soon beat the Germans. We'll sign up and all this. But of course, war isn't like that, is it?
That's like the defensive role in Norfolk. I've actually covered all of that in my book as well. My book actually starts in World War One. I actually write about my great grandfather who was killed in World War One. His name was Walter White, and of course he'd gone back to the lines not knowing he was going to have a son. And then, of course, his son was born, who was Walter White, who's my grandfather. And of course, he's killed, dies World War II. So, which is a tragic story. Both Wally Whites die, one World War One, one World War II. So that's really how the story evolves. So when they get to mobile training and formation of the battalion, I've done a lot of research into Norfolk and where they were, because the Beds and Herts were at Beeston Hall for some time, and also North Walsham is where that's the town that they were spent most of their time when they were out there, and then of course back at Thetford, and where was the other one? The old Labour camp. Where was that? Shouldn't have forgotten that. I'll have to refresh my notes. West Toffs. That's West Toffs. That's it. Sorry. So yeah, they spent probably up to 12 months out there in Norfolk before they went up to Scotland.
Yeah. You wait until you get our age. You'll forget everything. My memory is getting worse.
I'm starting to call them junior senior moments.
Yeah, mine are very senior moments. Honestly, sometimes my names, I'm finding names are getting harder and harder. But did you read the book about the chap who lost his legs, and also was blinded, and he got through the camps. That is a
No,
fantastic book. I've got it somewhere, and he actually got through the camps. That's absolutely fantastic. How did he get through them? You know, legs removed and blinded. But no,
With your mates. That's a whole.
yeah,
yeah,
well,
yeah,
but that's the type of thing that I mean. When they used to come in and talk to me, the Feebles, you heard the comradeship.
Mm,
That's what's missing in a lot of the books.
mm.
You get the fact, but you don't get them touches. Do you know what I mean? Little touches, little things that happened that they laughed about. I mean, it wasn't all gloom in the camps. They did laugh in the camps. You know, they had
Oh,
fun in the
absolutely.
camps. But you don't
Absolutely.
hear about that in some books. It's all the
Yep.
Arthur Lane was one. Arthur Lane could only see the bad bits.
Mm.
He couldn't see the good bits that happened. And there's a lot of good stuff in the camps. I mean, the
I mean,
comments.
obviously once the line was completed, I mean, they could get supplies all the way up and down the line to all the areas in the camps.
Yeah.
It was really through the construction period when the monsoon started in May and June of 43 is when things turned really, really bad, and then that's when most of the deaths occurred, and that's because the river was too low. They couldn't get past the rapids at Tarkanoon, and of course the roads turned to a bog because they were still building the roads, and then of course the rains came down, and then they couldn't get anything through. So everything was going up with pack horse or carts or whatever. Is the only way you could get stuff to the camps, and that's of course when most of the guys really, really suffered, especially around Sonkirai, as we know, because it was just so hard to get supplies into it. So when you actually consider, like, look, you read a lot of war diaries or personal diaries, and you look at Christmas, for example. You know, some of the spreads they had at Christmas are quite superb. You know, I look at the menus and go, "Phew, Jesus, that's better than some of the homeless get in in the Western world these days." You know,
But you have got to remember, though, some of them were made up. My dad's
of course, of course,
some are
but
made up. I mean, when they mix rice with something.
Yes. So they were labelled. They were
it's
labelled differently,
something
of course.
fantastic. Yeah.
But what surprised me is I've read about Christmas at Tamarampah, which is Johnson's camp up, which is now under the dam these days. It's no longer accessible. They talk about in the war diaries I've read about Christmas '43, and we had a movie that night. I mean that's quite a remote camp. You know, that's quite a far. That's probably another 20-30 k's above Tarkanoon. Anyway, I was always surprised to hear that. A movie. Well, how can they have a movie on the camp? You know, and of course in Thailand just last week, Rod showed me one of Sagano's photos from that particular camp, and lo and behold, there's a big white sheet all erected. And it was an improvised little movie.
Yeah, I found
So
I found a video on YouTube about the railway, and they explain it at the beginning that that's a Japanese-made film, and we were told we were given good stuff to wear and everything, and they went through this film,
Yes.
and then afterwards they went through what actually did happen. You know, not the stuff in the film which the Japanese wanted everyone to see, but what really was happening. And the uniforms were taken straight off them afterwards, and they showed women in Indonesia in a camp with big fire and big log. That was absolutely better than some of our houses. And afterwards they explained what it was really like. They weren't in.
But I think this was based on what the Germans were doing in the concentration camps, because they made similar films, and I think the Japanese emulated, what they saw the Germans doing, because the Germans did films where there were lots of happy children and that sort of thing. And in Poland as well, they filmed there, and of course with the Germans and the Japanese, being in league with one another. The Japanese thought, well, that's a good idea, we'll do the same. And they put out those films in the same way that the Germans did, which is quite interesting, really, isn't it? We sometimes forget about the German and Japanese link, don't we?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Sorry,
that's what I was
interrupting.
alluding to afterward, before that. Pre 1942, there was an awful lot that was going on, in Japan and Thailand, and also with the Axis agreements with Germans and the Italians. And the politics behind that is a whole area, that you're talking of books, and the best books I've found on this are the books that were written at the time. I've got a book by Sir Josiah Crosby somewhere. He was the British foreign minister based in Bangkok from about in the 1920s, I think. He was there a long time, and he just recalls all this shenanigans that's going on. The 1932 coup d'état in Thailand, where the absolute monarchy was deposed and a constitution was put in, and then that's when the politics really start to develop. So, sorry, I'm going off piste, but
No, it's all interesting. It's all interesting.
Some years ago, I used to go into the London Gazette quite a bit to find different bits and pieces, and I came across loads and loads of reports of the actual officers who were there and their report on a certain battle. Some of them are quite. I mean, they do put it in such a way that wasn't their fault, as what happened elsewhere, that wasn't their fault. But those reports are quite good. If you go in, you can find them. They're mostly supplements, and they're quite interesting. I've got quite a few of them actually on. If you go into the FIBO community, go into articles, down the bottom of the page are reports, and they're all the reports of the Prince of Wales and Percival's report. They're all at the bottom of the page. Now they took a lot of time because you have to type them all out, and they did take me a long time to do, but they're quite interesting to read. But anyway, we've got a big thing going on today, Barbara.
Absolutely. I've got to go and fetch my mother. I'm talking
about the FA Cup.
Oh, well. Yeah. Mother will watch that historically.
Yeah. And Fremantle are playing in Sydney tonight.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
but Gillian says, "Why did you have a meeting today with the wedding going on?" I said, "Well, I did actually think about the wedding. To be honest, I mean, I don't know about you, Barbara, but my dad wasn't a royalist. My dad wasn't a royalist.
He was very admiring of Mountbatten. Didn't say much about the others. And then somebody the other day was telling me that Mountbatten wasn't all he was supposed to be.
Lady Mountbatten, she did a lot in the camps after the hospitals. She went around visiting them all, and Dad really liked her.
Yeah, and in fact, I think I told you last time in the meeting we were about to celebrate Ron Mockford's birthday, and he was 95 at the start of May, and he spoke about Lord and Lady Mountbatten coming into the camp in Changi and talking to them, and he always spoke very well about the Fannies, the nurses that looked after them, and that sort of thing. I've got his little thing here that we did tribute to him, which is really sweet, about Ron Mockford. And no, I don't know how my dad felt, really. I mean, my long-lasting and overriding thing about my dad as I grew up was that he never spoke about his experiences, but he wanted to know what had happened while he wasn't here. He looked up all about Dunkirk, all that sort of thing that he'd missed while he was in prison. And he always spoke with such great admiration and support for the chaps that he knew that had been involved in Europe, and never said about what had happened to him, really, which was sad. I mean, he he read so many books on European history of the war,
Yeah.
and we saw all those films, you know, the Dam Busters, all that sort of thing, but never really spoke about what happened to
Yeah.
himself.
Well, my dad gave me most of his books, and there isn't one on Japan,
No.
not one on the Japanese. That's all Europe.
Mm.
All his books were on Europe, and
Yeah.
so they're good books to read. Some are
Yeah.
a bit gruesome, but they're good books to read. But not one on Japan, not one on the Far East. He didn't want to know.
Well,
That was all.
when we're going back to talking about, you know, like Martin, you're doing the archaeology, and yourself, Ray, you know, which if you write a book, you're living with what happened with them then, a generation down, the real feeling of it. When I went out to Saigon to see where Dad had been a prisoner and talked to locals, they didn't even know, you know, they were amazed to think that any British were in Saigon during that war.
Yeah.
And you, Ronnie, your dad was there. There were two tailors there. My dad is a tailor too. My maiden name was Taylor. You know, and all they talked about was the Americans and the war that happened with them, which is why, to me, the archaeology that Ray and Martin are doing is so important, because none of the archaeology was there, really. Have you seen the go-downs, Ronnie, where your dad presumably worked, like my dad?
I've got some maps of the camps. I've managed to get some maps of the camps. But you said they don't know much about it, but you're talking to the Vietnamese, aren't you?
To the young Vietnamese, because when
not
we
the
went,
French, not the French.
no, and we went
No,
down onto the river where the go-downs and the camps were,
Yeah.
and there are a few of the go-downs are left there now. We
If you'd
talked
have
to locals; they didn't really know what had
No,
happened.
I think the Vietnamese didn't want the French there.
No.
I mean, they wanted them out. Because that's one of the things, Dad, I think I've told you before, when they were actually going after the French, when Dad was liberated, and they were told they had to stay in camp because they were actually killing the French.
Yes.
But if you talk to the French, of course, you'd got more out of them than you would the Vietnamese.
Yeah. Oh,
They didn't
yes.
want us there. They wanted us out. So I suppose that was handed down from their parents to the young ones. I mean, they didn't want us there.
But there was nothing left historically, you know, to go and see, apart from the fact that because we'd seen photographs, my husband had even managed to track American bombers flying up the river where they go-downs were and dropping bombs and destroying the ships. But there's nothing really that you can go and visit and track. That's why I love to listen about the railway, but it means nothing to me. You know, at all. It's really sad.
Didn't he go from Saigon to the railway?
No, my dad stayed in Saigon.
He stayed in Saigon. Because a lot of them didn't they?
They did, yes. A whole load of them went. He went to, I don't know how you pronounce it, Pahumi or Fumi, to build an airstrip. But that was the only time he left there.
I just took it because your dad was in Saigon. He actually went on the railway.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't moved. He was
So
lucky.
he was
lucky.
He was in the small party that stayed in Saigon. Because there was just a small party stayed there. A large party went to the railway, didn't they?
Yeah, he was very lucky not to go to the railway. Very lucky.
Yeah.
You know, as Carol Cooper said to me, your dad was in the holiday camp. Well, you know, I'd perhaps not. You know, he bore the scars. In fact, I was looking today. My uncle told me more. He said, "Did you never see the scars on his back where he was?
Really, my dad.
Where he had whiplashes with a sword. You know, they flayed his back."
My dad might have met him then.
Yeah.
Because Dad went to Saigon in February '45.
Yeah, the fact that they're both tailors, they may well have, spoken.
Slightly did, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's been a good meeting. Have you enjoyed it? Sorry,
absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Fascinated by Ray and Martin and their ongoing research.
I think the enthusiasm shines through.
Oh, it does. And seeing those things that Martin that you had, that's amazing. I love to see those. You know.
Well, I think, Martin, for me today, seeing that thing, it's just focused my mind a little bit to. So far, I've been unable to find a plan of the camp in any of the archives. but actually on the ground there is a guy there who remembers the camp, and he took me to the location. But I think now I've got a connection with the mayor and the police and that. I think I'll get permission to use a metal detector and go and have a scour around.
Yeah, you never know what's going to come up.
Just one little anecdote. The Tide guy is 80 odd years old and can't speak a word of English, but his enthusiasm comes over. And he said one day, "Oh, I'll take you to where the Japanese stored some bombs." So we drove round to this little farm, and we had to wait in the car while he went to the house. And turned out that just the previous year, the farmer had bulldozed all the tunnels where the bombs were kept and everything. So it had completely gone, And I mean, once it's gone, isn't it? You can't
unless there's still some metal down there.
That's true, Martin. That's what made me think. Well, luckily, I'm going back to Thailand in July. I'm going for 6 weeks this time, so I'll have plenty of time to go and scour the area and find out a bit more.
Yeah, that happened to me because I used to write a lot on Yarmouth.
Guys, I'm going to have to go and fetch my mum. So thank you for a fascinating meeting.
Okay.
See you again soon. Okay.
Bye.
Yeah. See you later.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. This chap from Galston got in touch with me and said, "Can you let me know where the caves were along the cliffs?" And I knew they had some guns along there in caves. I had no idea where they were. I mean, they were along the cliffs in Galston, and he wanted me to tell him where these flipping caves were. I don't know where the caves were, But see, all my ancestors were fishermen, driftermen. So a lot of my interest was in the drifters. So I didn't know where they were. Anyway, it's been a good meeting. Thank you for attending. I know I didn't think Barbara would be there because I thought the wedding might have kept Barbara because I started now. And anyway, so I'll just turn record off.